So now we're into chapter 23, and we're seeing a further development of a reaction to what we learned about the ideologies and the conflicts within European society, and how European societies are going to be able to come to terms with all of these problems. And we're going to see the rise of the coming of mass politics. In other words, when we're talking about mass politics, it's a political culture characterized by the participation of non-elites. And what I want to point out is that much of the time, as you're going to see here, it's elites realizing they have to compromise with the threat of a revolution by the masses. And I kind of want you to think about the implications of that. I'm going to really kind of move quickly through this chapter and focus on certain points. So I still want you to read thoroughly the text, as I mentioned every time. But I want you to think just about a few things here that kind of like complements where we were at in the last chapter. So here we'll talk more about Russian anarchists, as this picture depicts right here, and the assassinations later. So we see, in Europe, this is more or less you're still seeing people that in the agricultural sector, for example, living very humbly. Okay, we see the economic transformation, which is still causing a lot of problems and social unrest. So we have immigration and urbanization, and class hostilities and the mixtures of racism and national hostilities that happen under these kind of circumstances, which are typical. Okay, and so I think it's kind of interesting that you always see heightened class hostilities and ethnic tensions under economic transformations that are not looking balanced. Okay, so new things are happening too, like bicycles, don't forget. We'll talk maybe a little bit more about that later. Okay, so here's what I want to talk about. Defining the political nation, nation-making, franchise expansion, social reform, schooling the nation, triumph of national language, history and geography lessons, nationalistic rituals. Again, there are many things in this section that may seem familiar to us even in America and seem completely natural to do as a nation state. Other things were kind of seen more like the way that we looked at Hitler Youth or something. But, okay, so there's several things I want to mention. And I think that this should help us also figure out more even of how modern politics work. You notice in this reading that elites really had to take a careful look at the world circumstance. Industrialization and capitalism created a lot of wealth and also a lot of wealth disparity. They knew that. And what they also knew is that they were seeing places in where a nonconformist elites faced nonconforming political ideologies that ended up in revolution and violence. And ever since the French Revolution, they've been especially aware of that. But after going through these series of events, even as the conservatives come on top, again, I was mentioning in my last lecture before from the other chapter, what everyone always wants is stability, because you can't get anything done in chaos. And if anybody likes chaos, it's only to take advantage of the chaos to put their position into power and then create stability. But no one's going to want perpetual chaos. Okay, it's not good for the markets. You can't have a capitalist or socialist or a communist society, surviving in civil unrest and turmoil. So the radical left really pressured the far right into making compromises that basically defanged workers' angst and was able to see reforms, more voting rights, more workers' rights, and basically people saying, workers of the world unite, yeah, but also we can barbecue again. I can have a normal life. I kind of don't need to overthrow the government right now. I don't want to get arrested because there's actually something in the system for me that's worth, just being a normal working citizen now, as opposed to stirring up things. Okay, so you have that kind of going on, and as I mentioned here, you see on page 722, and I think I talked about that again in the last chapter. But German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck did just that. He brought in social welfare at the expense of the socialists, but to co-opt their platform and to tame his population. Okay, and critics, far left critics now, and people in labor movement now criticize the Democrats, for example, co-opting their ideas. In other words, all of the socialist things that the Democrats are accused of doing, to many people, are merely kind of what elites have been doing for a long time. Is that you've got to give enough bread and cheese. You got to give something to the workers to keep them subdued. Because if you had unemployed people not having something, they're going to do something else and create trouble. Now, there's going to be a counter narrative to that, and it's going to say that some of these social programs can contribute to social unrest. So say the other side of this. But this is basically what's at stake. Now, let's talk about school. Mass schooling then starts taking place, and this is seen as a place for creating nation states. Schools are not neutral. In many cases in public schools now, especially at the elementary level, you see many school boards operating in the same way throughout even American history. And in fact, I would argue that why college is associated with radicalism in modern day culture, so you get a good, upper middle class kid who goes through school just like normal, and then he or she goes into college, and they come out a radical, and they're, demonstrating, and they're influenced by their terribly radical professors. Why is that? And why have college students always kind of been seen as to be this way? I would argue that college is where you actually study and engage with texts, and you for some, generally, and each nation has been different, but I think that the ability to think outside the box of a national narrative often would take place in college, where people get together and they can discuss things, and they're more engaged in it, and they find counter narratives to the official nationalist ideology. So, I mean, it's funny, Soviet students would often question the official Soviet ideology. You would have in America having the same kind of thing. I think it's almost a natural kind of set of circumstances. In any case, schooling is supposed to be basically a place of political indoctrination, and that's the way it's set up at this time. And to really try to create a national language and to punish kids for using languages, or not allow them to speak other languages in the classroom or elsewhere. In other words, to create national unity through language. Okay, and history, of course, you're going to teach everything that makes your history look good. So again, this is why you'll notice people always say, "Oh, well, how come I didn't learn about all this other history in my high school? Is my high school teacher lying to me?" They're lying. Is just public schools have tended for a long time to use history and geography to create lessons that educate the students to think about the nation in a way that they want them to. Now, in modern times, it gets more complicated, but you can see how that is important. And being a historian has often been to be the official narrators of the stories that the elites want you to tell in their way. And to depart from that is political subversion, even if the facts say otherwise. Now, that is why, the field of history has to be challenged all the time under, when you've had censorship of certain states to do that, other historians have to come in and kind of help clean up the damage, right? When the Soviet Union fell, their archives were opened up for the first time, and Russian history was going to be retaught. But then, Japanese history in Japan is taught different than it is over here. There's a lot of things that get highlighted in one country at the expense of another. Sometimes it's almost conspiratorial, sometimes not, but it's something to just keep in mind. Okay, and so then the idea of nationalistic rituals, of parades, and inventing traditions that feel like they've been around for a long time. Okay, if you saw in that Romanticism clip where Parliament in Britain is rebuilt to look like an ancient building as opposed to a new one, to give it a look of harkening back to the past. There's been many studies by on nationalism in current times, and this invention of the past to be put into ceremonies in the present that look like something that's been going on since the medieval times or before, that are all actually quite new. So that's all I want to say about that. Here's our innocent school where everybody's learning to be good nationalists. Okay. So yeah, national holidays, militaristic pageantries. These are all things I think we recall seeing the Soviet Union and the fascists do. Well, where did they get these ideas from? They came from this time period. They weren't inventing this stuff. Here's a good example, right? I mean, aren't you proud? Come on, can't you see it if you're there, right? Nice uniforms, swords, statues, big buildings. Okay. So, in any case, here's what Europe ends up looking at the end of the 19th century. Here we got Germany really coming into being. And a lot of, here's Poland, a part of the Russian Empire. Ukraine, oh, there it is. Okay, part of the Russian Empire. Okay. All right, I am going to end it here, and we'll return back to this next section.